If you grew up in suburban Australia, then you'll remember the familiar sight of green and gold trailers every now and then mowing our lawns. Jim's Mowing has since grown into a much larger group and now serves about 35,000 customers a day, is the largest franchise in Australia and New Zealand, and turns over something like $500 million a year, which is incredible. But don't let the blue-collar grass mowing story fool you. Dr. David Jim Penman, that's right, Doctor, he's shaking his head, is in fact quite a student of history and has some very interesting parts of his life that we're going to discuss today. I originally wanted Jim on to talk about our business innovation series and how we can recover from the coronavirus, but I suspect we'll spend a lot of time talking about our political psychology series. So it's my honor to welcome you. I was going to say doctor, but you don't seem to like that. No. All right, Jim. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I don't mind using the title in an academic context, but certainly in general terms, no.
I do it in jest, but I do it because I think people see you as well, we only get to see you in small media grabs, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because you are a deep character.
Well, yes, okay.
Well, let me put it this way. I tried to do some research on you, and I discovered your entire content creation that you're doing at the moment. And I don't think you're getting enough airtime. You do some great podcasts. There's Jimcast, there's Ask Jim. You do a lot of appearances, and you discuss things way beyond mowing lawns and business. Things about character, psychology. Maybe we should tell the audience a bit about who you are deep down on the inside. Before you started the business, you were an academic.
Well, intended to be an academic, yes. The way my life has turned out has been very strange, totally different to anything I could have expected. I went to university, started in 1971. My aim was to work out why civilizations collapse. I mean, that's what you do. I've been interested in that since I was, say 14. When I read The Peloponnesian Wars by Thucydides, and I became absolutely impassioned about what happened. Why did such a incredibly great people and great culture, why did they decay? Why did the Roman Empire collapse? I had this question. And I was also interested in biology and stuff too, and all sorts of questions, like, for example, with any normal population of animals, when they become plentiful food,
yes,
the populations grow. With humans, it's the opposite. When you get plentiful food, populations tend to shrink, which is bizarre. So I had these questions. So I went to university to try and discover this. My whole aim was to be a researcher, an academic. I was no interest at all in making money. I used to live off the most incredibly cheap, simple way because I just didn't want anything to distract from my ability to focus on my research.
So can we go straight into that? Because you're referring to something, the Malthusian trap. So this idea where a population will only rise to the level of its resources as food. So shall we talk about gibbons and baboons?
Well, what it's about basically is that humans are very different we're very like animals,
yes,
in most ways. This is the important thing to understand. In terms of the basic structure of why we do things like have children and so forth, and why we look after them, and relationships between sex and all that, we're very, very similar to chimpanzees and baboons, gibbons and so forth. The biology is the same, but the way it works in human society is entirely different because we've got conscious control of things like contraception that make all the difference. Basically, the simple idea is this. There are ways that animals have of adapting their behavior to environments. So, for example, if you have an animal that is in a very stable environment,
yes,
like a gibbon living in a tropical forest,
yes,
food is much the same year round.
Yes.
Doesn't vary a lot.
Yes.
Now, to be successful in that environment, what you have to do is to be very, very competitive. You have to have very few young, but raise them to be really, really successful. The reason is because if you're a gibbon, unless you're actually really, really capable, you don't get to own a territory. You can't breed. So they have relatively few. They delay their mating and breeding. They won't mate till they've got a territory because otherwise you just starve. There's not enough to eat. So you don't breed until that happens. You have relatively few young, relatively low sex drive, for example, and you basically put all these efforts into try and create a relatively few but highly successful young.
Yes.
Now this is called a slow life history strategy.
Right. Like humans.
Well, we're relatively slow, yes, but the point of it is individual species and groups can be different. Now the other extreme is an animal like a baboon, which is, similar level of intellect to a gibbon,
Yes.
but a very different animal. They live in a very unstable environment,
Yes.
basically savannas of Africa. Now, most of the time food is very, very plentiful. At the same time, risk of predation is extremely high, which it isn't for gibbons. Gibbons
Right.
are very rarely predated because they just swing through the trees.
Yes.
Baboons, they're often killed by leopards, lions, all kinds of things. Not only that, but you have these very severe famines.
So it's like the Lion King type environment, the savannah they're living in.
Yeah, it's very, very dangerous, very variable. Now, in that kind of environment, what you've got to do if you're going to succeed, because death is so random,
Yes.
what you've got to do is to breed as fast as you possibly can.
Yes.
So you have lots and lots of young, but you don't spend a lot of time with them. You just kick them out, say, go on, and you have more young. You start breeding very young. You don't have pair bonds. You don't defend territories. You have groups working together. This is what's called a fast life history strategy.
Right.
Now, humans, baboons, gibbons are all relatively slow by the standards of, say, mice or something like that.
Yes.
But there are differences within these kinds of groups. Now, what's interesting, though, is that particular difference is largely hardwired genetically. I mean, gibbons in captivity don't act very differently to those that do in the wild. They're very fussy about mating, for example. But within a species, the species can actually, populations can change to be relatively slow or relatively fast in terms of their behaviour. And it seems to be based on food.
Right.
So, for example, where you get baboons, for example, who live in relatively tougher areas with less food, they actually they have smaller groups, mostly, say, one male, multiple females and so forth, and they act more like slow.
Yes.
In other areas, they're more like fast. And what this is it's an adaptation. And what it does is it allows a population to adapt to different types of food supply. Now, it's not like baboons to gibbons there, but it's within that sort of range. They can change there, they can change there, which is pretty sensible.
Of course, yeah.
So it's a direct reaction, and what it seems to be, it's an epigenetic reaction. It actually changes not the genes, but the way the genes function. They turn certain genes certain off. So that means it can be depending not only on your own environment, but that of your parents and even your grandparents. Because what it's saying is, hey, this is not much food, but fairly safe. Okay, let's act slow, or plentiful food. So it takes a few generations to switch from one to the other.
Well, can you have an epigenetic change within a lifespan of a human? Say with the foods we eat, surely we're switching genes on and off.
Yes.
Yes.
It absolutely does have that effect.
Okay.
But to take the full effect, see what you have here, you've got to go from here, which is very slow, to here, very fast.
Yes.
You can go like that in one generation,
Right.
and then it takes a few generations to get from one extreme to the other.
Right.
Which has a lot of implications for human society. Now, interesting thing about this is that slow versus fast behaviour. Now, I call slow behaviour high C, and there's reasons for that. The way that human civilizations work is that high C behaviour is very, very useful for building civilizations from a number of points of view. First of all, high C or slow life history populations tend to be hard-working. So if you're a gibbon, for example, you can't wait for food just to appear because there's not much of it. So you've got to be all the time, you've got to be searching for the food that's available. There's just one particular tree where the figs are ripening, other over there. So you've got to be looking all the time. You've got to be constantly searching. Yes. You've got to be constantly looking around for, neighbouring troops to keep them away from you, to protect your own area. So it's a very hard-working sort of environment. If you also, these kinds of populations tend to have relatively impersonal kinds of relationships.
Okay.
So in other words, they relate more to the territory rather than individuals. Like a baboon is related to the people in the environment, to the population, to the other people in the troop, whereas the gibbon is oriented towards the land.
Right.
So in human populations, what that means is that if you can have relatively low C or high C, or you can be slow life history strategy, you can work harder, which means you're much better at farming. Not only that, but you tend to form larger groups. You can be loyal to ideas at the extreme, even laws and so forth, or rulers that you've never seen and so forth. So impersonal loyalties help not only have much denser populations, but they also tend to be much more coherent.
You're describing our Western world.
Yes. Or any civilization in general.
Okay.
I mean, even Chinese, for example, or Indians are relatively low C. So what happens is when you have a conflict between your large populations, your large states, your dense populations, and the hunter-gatherers, well, guess who wins?
The civilized, yes.
And that's what's happened right through our history.
Yes.
So it's a very good thing for human success within our very competitive species to have slow life history strategy or high C. C is for civilization. C is also for control, because you tend to control your offspring in various ways. So how do you achieve that? And this is the point, because the trouble is, in human populations, food is not consistently very, very short.
Not anymore, since the agricultural revolution.
That's right. And a lot of people, especially ruling in the ruling classes, are relatively got plentiful food.
Yes.
So many people have got more food than they can eat. So you can't rely on food. So, but there's other things that actually have the same effect. And one of them is control of sexual behaviour. And interestingly enough, you can do these things in rats, for example. If you want to make a rat high C, what you do is you limit the food. We've done a lot of experiments with rats. We actually reduce their food by 25% and below what they'd like to eat. And they become, say, much more exploratory. And they behave in a lot of different ways, but very much like that. But the interesting thing is you can actually achieve the same thing by restricting their sexual behaviour. So, for example, if you have a rat that's exposed, has sexual activity at the age of puberty, it's very different. It's more like that. It's lower C, the one who doesn't.
Right.
So in human societies, what we do is we actually have cultural technologies, which are basically mainly religions, which allow people to create this high C temperament.
By restricting sexual behaviour to a later age and increased control, discipline, all of that.
Yes, control and discipline of children. Now that depends on having the high C temperament. If you're not very high C in yourself, you tend to you not want to control children. But if you're high C, now it's not the only thing. Other things that will affect that. Sexual restraint is obviously number one. Yeah. That's the most powerful one. It's very, very effective, particularly because it's in puberty.
Right.
In the period after puberty, in teenage years. Yes. It's in that immediate period. It's very, very, very important how much sexual activity you have. The less you have, the higher the C. Other things too, fasting obviously, which is part of most religions. Also, a good example is the Jewish ritual law, where there's a huge number of restraints on behaviour, including quite arcane things. Keeping the Sabbath, for example, very rigorously, having to do certain things, eating certain food. All of these have the same kind of effect. They increase this level of C.
So you're attributing our, civilizational success to some of those factors.
Yes.
So now we're seeing, a breakdown of those things for well, I would have said for better or worse, but you're saying probably for the worse now. The sexual revolution. What about in terms of just, we are now gluttonous in the sense that we have entertainment, we have food, we have comfort. Even if you're the poorest of the poor, you have a Galaxy smartphone and Netflix. So how does that translate into where we're going as a species?
Well, obviously, what's happened is our industrial civilization, which arose out of a really, really, really high C society, which is 19th century Europe, which is the highest C ever known. In Scandinavia, girls wouldn't reach puberty until like the age of 17, which is unheard of.
Okay.
No country in the world today has that. So that's a good sign.
Wait, you're saying their biology was affected by the environment and puberty was delayed?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
17. See, people talk about the age of puberty is one of the clues that led me to this thing.
Yeah.
Like people talk about the fact that the age of puberty has declined so much in the last 150 years.
Yes.
That's because of better nutrition. Yes, but the interesting thing about it is that the age of puberty in the Middle Ages, say around 1300, was around 14.
Okay.
It's actually very similar to what it is today. So there was an immense delay leading up to the 19th century and down. That's what happened. What you've got is a society where the level of C, for various reasons to do with Christianity and other things to do, Christianity is a very powerful culture, developed this very, very high C character, which at its peak in the 19th century made industrialization possible, because industrialization is a very, very, very high C. So we developed this incredible technology, Now, the irony of that is the very success of the technology made us incredibly wealthy.
Yes.
And what that's done, therefore making us wealthy and urbanised, has the same effect, has actually dropped dramatically the level of sea. It's going down like really, really, really fast. And what's happening, you can see the effects already. You know, societies are becoming less coherent. You're starting to get gaps like between rich and poor, for example. Productivity isn't going up, even though there's immense... I'm reading in The Economist about why productivity isn't rising. You've got all these great new technologies and new things all the time, computers, technology, everything, and yet productivity is not going up. Well, that's because as fast as technology rises, character is dropping. People are becoming less capable. And if you have a look at the success of someone like Tesla, for example.
Elon. I used to work for Elon.
Yeah. But what does he do? He actually brings together the most incredibly capable, driven engineers and technical and scientists.
Yes.
And he has these incredible results.
Yes.
It's all about people.
Right.
And there's not enough people now who are like that as we're losing this change of character. So what actually is going to happen is that we're going to decline. Our Western societies, it's already the sign, the birth rate's already dropped below replacement level. Society become less coherent, democracy will weaken, economies will go backwards, and we go down in classic decline like the ancient Romans, except much faster. That's where we're heading.
What will come in its place? Are there alternatives rising up?
Yes. What you'll get is the advanced peasant societies of places like the Middle East. It's already happening. Because Muslim societies, even though they're affected, they're much less affected.
Right.
So what's actually happened throughout history is that there's been the early civilizations, the really great creative civilizations like those of Sumer, of ancient China in the Zhou dynasty up to 200, and also of the early Indians of the Ganges Valley,
right.
where all the great, if you look at the great thinkers of history, they come from these kinds of periods when you had city-states or nation-states, small groups of people bonding together, incredibly creative. And then what happens is they then unite into these cosmopolitan empires, and then they collapse into long periods of barbarism. When they come out, they have a different nature, and there's actually a genetic change take place, which I believe is to do with the way that people treat infants. They're more indulgent of infants, which actually stops this high society arising. So they become much, much more stable and much more resistant to the corrosive effect, less likely to become wealthy in the first place, and more resistant to the effects of wealth anyway.
And so when you talk about infants, are you suggesting more stricter upbringing in the early infant period results in high C?
Yeah.
Okay.
The way people treated infants as an example, if you're in the Arab world, for example,
yes.
which is a typical advanced, mature civilization, one of these, infants are extremely indulged.
Oh, I
really?
didn't know that. Okay.
Now, whereas, for example, in ancient Greece, they were known for being very, very strict with toddlers. Spartan nannies were really, they were liked because they were so strict. Now, the most extreme strictness, though, comes in 19th century Europe, when you get this fanatical attitude of control of everything. Even kids were toilet trained from the age of 3 months, this kind of stuff. It's extraordinary when you read about it. People think that's brutal, but actually it was behind this really, really high C temperament. It created it. And the interesting thing is there's a society described by Margaret Mead, the Manus people, which actually had a very weird system in which the infants were really, really, really tightly controlled, but there was no control of older children. And they're very different things. The control of older children and punishment actually tends to create this very stable, conservative kind of temperament. But control of infants has a very, very flexible, but also impersonal. So what you got is these people in the Manus people who were actually incredibly good at technology when they got access to it. They were great traders, but they had no political group beyond the village. So that these have very different effects. Well, in the, say, Arab world, you have a society which is the opposite. You have extreme indulgence of infants and toddlers, but really, really harsh treatment. So they're the opposite. They have very, very big, stable political units, but they're economically much less capable.
So where are we now? Most people would be, I guess, the earlier, there would be, are we leading towards a society that's indulgent of infants? Are we going that way in the West?
No, as dramatically so.
And the effect is going to be we're going to become more like the Arab world? Is that what you suggest?
Well, in the end, yes, of course. Well, what's going to happen is we'll become basically very weak and largely die out, and then more vigorous places like the Arab world will come in and take over, as they already are in Europe. You can see the effect.
So you remind me of that quote, good times create weak men, weak men create bad times create strong men create good times. So how do we reverse, how do we stop this?
Well, it's actually, that's the funny thing about it. It's actually very simple, because it's an epigenetic change. And we know a lot about epigenetics now. This is only in the last 20 years and so. When I was doing my PhD theory, nobody used the word. Nobody had this idea. In fact, I couldn't figure out a lot of things. I thought people would be changed by their upbringing, but that didn't seem to explain it. It seemed to be what was going on in previous generations had an effect. It was too slow. Why was that? And then when epigenetics came out, and I think, that's why. It takes time to go through this process. But what you can do, and it wouldn't even be difficult, you actually learn how to control the epigenetics. So you actually develop a treatment that will increase the level of C.
What do you mean by treatment? You're not talking about drugs, clearly. You're talking about environmental pressures.
No, environment would work. If everybody fasted and abstained from sex, it would work. But it can't happen because people can't change that much.
What do you mean by fasted first? Do you mean intermittent fasting? Do you mean once a month going on a...
limit to food, like we do with rats.
Oh, so just caloric restriction in general?
Yeah.
Okay.
Calorie restriction would work.
Yeah.
Extreme avoidance of sexual activity would work. Everybody keeping the Sabbath would work, but you can't do it.
This is not a popular thing to say, stop having sex.
No, of course not. Especially not having sex. It doesn't so much matter what you do after you're in your 20s and you've got...
Oh, you're talking about during the puberty period.
Yeah. Particularly in the period of puberty. But you can change the epigenetics quite easily. We're already doing it in rats. Now we have this 25% thing. For example, but there's other ways of doing it. So, and I'll give you an example, okay? You get rats that are, all that work's done on rats. You get rats that are kept short of food, and you get their bedding, and you give it to other rats. You actually exchange their bedding. So they take here's the bed, and then you have the control, the rats that are short of food, and you give it to another group of rats, and you see what difference. What actually happens is the rats that are given the bedding from the animals that are short of food start acting as if they're short of food.
Right.
They become more exploratory. Their sexual behaviour changes. They become better mothers, for example, much more interested in their offspring.
So it's the smell, the pheromones, the chemicals.
There's something in the thing. We've actually done mass spec to actually try to figure out, and we actually identified there's a few pheromones that you can find that are more strongly in this characteristic urine.
Yep.
And we're actually in the process of trying to test some of those.
This is great. So we can have a tablet that makes you productive in high C.
Yes, but it's not just that. Pheromones is one thing. You can also use things called cytokines. You can also use microRNA, which is like messengers that actually change effects. You could use microbes, for example, because microbes have a certain effect. We're actually trying about 5 different things. Also, use of other proteins to try and have this effect. Now, if it was more advanced, you could also use CRISPR.
Right. Wow.
Now, CRISPR is a gene editing technique that changes the genetic, but it can also be used to target the epigenome.
Yes.
At the moment, it's not useful technology because it's too wild. You're trying to shape that change, and these changes cut in two, which is why it's illegal to do it for babies. Yes. But if it was developed at the stage where you knew you could hit the right targets, I mean, the interesting thing about this is it wouldn't actually be that difficult to do. To actually help people to become a high C would be like an immunisation. I mean, like the Gates Foundation could do it for the world. It'd be simple and cheap. The implications are quite staggering. Now, people say, I don't want to have social engineering, but you wouldn't need to, because there's various effects of this thing medically. And one of the main things about being high C is that you actually tend to take a much longer view.
Right.
So it'd be very, very powerful and effective way for treating like addictions, like drug addiction. So what you can do is you can have somebody who is really drug addicted to the extent that they're useless. They've destroyed their life. They go into rehab, they just drift back again. You give them an injection, perhaps a series of, who knows? It could be just something you hang up of pheromones, who knows what it is. And they come out of it and they say, well, I don't want to have this anymore, because if I do, I won't be able to. So they go out, they give up their drugs, they get a job, they get educated, they start making a fortune. You get this around, this will be huge. Same thing with alcoholism. Many forms of mental illness too are actually based on having an overly what they call an overly fast. Basically what I would term they've got low C. So in actual fact, if you have this, you could use it for things like depression, for example, and certain kinds of disorders like that, possibly even schizophrenia. There's some evidence that this slow life history strategy is associated with a better reaction to those kind of things too. You could also have it as a student aid. Now, students will take Ritalin or anything to be successful. But the Ritalin's got lots of really bad effects. This stuff should have no bad effects at all. So what's going to happen is that people start taking it, students start taking it, because it's going to give them an incredible advantage over their peers. And suddenly those who take it are just winning all A's and they're becoming top of the... What do you think others are going to do? They're going to say, I want this stuff. And the same thing with teenagers. You've got teenagers who are delinquent. So you've got kids who are delinquent on drugs and stuff. You start giving this stuff to them as a medical treatment, and suddenly they go to the top of the class. What's everybody else going to say? Hey, these kids which were useless are now beating me hollow. I want some of this stuff too. If you could develop it. And the really crazy thing about this is not only that we could solve our problem so simply and cheaply, somebody could make billions of dollars by doing this. Because it's one of the greatest medical advances of all time. You've suddenly got a powerful thing to deal with it by looking at the epigenetics of behaviour.
I have to admit to you, Jim, you are scaring me. Because you mentioned social engineering, and this sounds fantastic. You're solving a lot of these problems, but we're talking about those dystopian movies where we inject them. There's a movie called Equals, where we are you sure we want to have a society like that? What about art? What about failure? What about the messiness of it? I mean, even as a man of faith, what about that beautiful story of redemption in faith? It's not about perfection, it's about that redemption story. I like that messiness in our humanity.
Let me say one thing. I see societies are the most messy, the most creative you could possibly have.
No.
They are the most opposed to tyranny.
Right.
You look at an area look at a time like Athens of the late 5th century, early 4th century BC. Now we're talking about a few tens of thousands of men because slaves and women were not. So this is a small population. You look at the kind of advances that they had. The advances in the foundation of modern philosophy, people like Socrates and Plato, the incredible architecture they had, the sculpture, the painting, even though we've lost it. Their vases were the most incredibly... They're still prized as some of the most precious possessions of all time. The beginning of theatre, the writing of history, people like Thucydides. Then you talk about the beginning of natural science, like Aristotle, who's a bit later, but all comes out of this period. What an incredible and creative period people they were. Now, that's what we're getting back to. And this kind of thing, this high C, will be the one thing that really, really, really stops tyrannies from happening. And what's happening now in Victoria right now is the consequences of this decline of C. People are becoming less resistant. It's the rule of people, the Premier's whim, rather than the rule of law. Is what's happening in this state, and that's the problems with it.
So what's going on in Victoria? Because I have a poll here, a news poll that came out today. 62% think the Premier has done very well or fairly well. This was measured about 5 days ago. Now, this political psychology series I'm doing, the main question we want to answer is not so much why is Dan doing what he's doing, because I don't think he's the problem. I think we are the problem, in the sense that why did we vote him back in with such a thumping majority? Why are we polling like this? Why do we love a paternalistic government so?
It's very much the same thing that's happened in the Roman Empire. You actually find it's not so much people have this vision of the Roman Empire going for 4 centuries and then collapsing. It didn't actually happen that way. What happened is there's this shift from impersonal loyalties down to personal ones that started as early as the 2nd century BC. And then you get the Roman public starting to come under pressure, and you get leaders like the Gracchi and so forth are coming up. And then as you move into the 1st century, you get Sulla and so forth in the early 1st century, and then you get Caesar and Pompey and Crassus and the rest. And then you get an empire. And an empire is a lot more personal than a republic.
Right.
And then, but during the course of the empire, you get this process continuing, and the rulers and the empires become more and more powerful and despotic, and the rule of law matters less and less and less. And at the same time, the economy starts to go down and down and down. It was at its peak in the 1st century AD, and then it went down and down and down. The Romans' ability was the fact that they could keep on getting new people, and you can see this where the emperors came from.
Right.
They came from, first of all, from Rome itself,
yes.
then from provincial Italy, like Vespasian, and then from Spain, and then from Illyria. So as they got more and more people in, they went to the same process of declining C. So that's what's happening in the early stages in Victoria right now. We're shifting from the rule of law and principles of governance of the public towards the more personal. So people have a loyalty to the Premier, which is quite incredible to me when you think of what he's done.
Yes.
But and the same thing is in America when they have a loyalty to Trump, independent almost of the fact that he is an incredibly immoral person. And I say that as somebody on the conservative side of politics on the whole. But he's a horrible man.
Right.
But yet people are loyal to him.
Right.
It becomes more and more personal. It's no longer the rule of law or of principle. It's the law. It's who am I loyal to?
And why are they primed that way? Because of the decline of C.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Because loyalties are going from impersonal to personal. It's why democratic governments collapse, as they did in ancient Athens, as they did in Rome, as they've done in other societies throughout history.
And where do you think Dan himself and his crew sit on this? Because I don't buy the excuse that he's trying to destroy Victoria. I think he's trying to save Victoria. He's on a crusade. Now, I think he is destroying our state. But his intentions, I'm wondering what he's going to do next. Because we see this omnibus bill that
which is appalling.
It's a joke.
But the thing of it is, look, he's an ambitious, powerful man. He loves power. I don't think he's financially corrupt. But he's been corrupted by power. But the thing is, too, people, what you said before, it's not so much the Premier, it's us. It's people like Caesar don't take control because they're unusually ambitious. Right. They take control because people will follow them, and they'll ignore the rules of the Republic. The Republic says that you don't take an army into Rome.
Yes.
Well, he did that, and people followed him.
Right.
That's the key thing. People think it's the leaders that matter. No, it's the followers that matter. And what's happening is that he is an ambitious man, and he'll do what he can get away with. But the fact of the matter is now people will follow him, whereas 20, 30 years ago they wouldn't have. They wouldn't have accepted it. They just wouldn't. They'd looked at him and said, this man is incompetent.
Yes. This
man is dangerous. This man has done so much damage. This man continues to do so much damage. But now it's not, are you for the Premier or are you against him? And when I get people who write to me, and about 95% are actually supportive, they say, good on you, Jim, for standing up to him. But there's people who aren't, and I always write back to them. And I just explain. I said, why is it reasonable for, council workers in groups can operate and
mow a lawn,
whereas an individual can't do exactly the same lawn.
Right, it's absurd.
Now I ask these questions to them. Now it doesn't register with them. It doesn't register because to them, I am for the Premier. Yeah. That's it. Right. No argument matters. Now the fact that the Premier might be doing something which is like the Premier caused this problem.
Yes.
Genetic tests show it. No, I'm for the Premier. They can't grasp it because to them the loyalty to a person and to a party and to a system actually overcomes their sense of judgment. And that's happening in America on this other side of things too. You get very, like a man like Mitt Romney, for example, who's a deeply principled individual. And he's one of the ones who's standing up to Trump and saying, no, this isn't right. This is why they're not actually, people like him are likely to not allow Trump to put the new justice of the Supreme Court before the election. Right. That's a matter of very deep held principle.
Yes.
But most of the Republicans in the Senate and most of his supporters are saying, no, put him in. Even though, back in the past with Obama, they actually argued ferociously on a matter of principles for the opposite case. But now the political, being on the winning side.
Flipped. I mean, Obama is saying they should have put them through back then. Now he's saying they should wait.
Exactly.
It's very opportunistic on all sides.
It's loyalty to people overcoming loyalty to principle, and that's what happens when the Roman Republic collapsed, and that's the way we're heading right now.
Okay, so how do we move the? So, all right, Leonard Hayes, the justice in the US, said liberty resides in the hearts of men and women, and when it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it.
Yes.
How do we save liberty in our hearts of Victoria, in the people?
There is no hope except through science.
Science?
Science. The science of epigenetics. It is the only thing that can do it. Nothing else will have an effect. Look, there's always a tendency to think, because to us, both of us, and we have obviously relatively similar views, to us, what's going on is obvious. I mean, it's outrageous, but that's because our temperament is lined that way. If you have a different temperament, you're not going to see things in the same way. You're going to see things differently. People think that you can persuade people with their minds. No, you can't. It's like saying a cork bobbing in the sea. and the cork goes up and down, you think, well, if I can stop the cork. No, it's the sea that's causing the problem. The premier is the cork. We are the sea.
So do you think the Conservatives need to become more emotional? Or they're trying to convince the left to become more rational. That's not working.
No. I'm saying there's no hope. I'm saying there's absolutely no hope in political terms because we are moving so fast downhill. It's like, look, okay, there's an avalanche going down the hill. Tons and tons and tons of snow.
Yeah.
Now, pick up a snowball and chuck it at the avalanche.
Yeah.
Now, in a sense, you're right. If you put 1 million snowballs at the avalanche, it'll probably stop it because there'll be enough snow. But how much effort do you think, how much effect is one snowball going to have against those thousands of tons of falling snow? Nothing.
You're killing me, Jim.
I know. Because I know what you're fighting for. I know what you do it. And in a sense, you've got to do what you can to fight it. But in the end, you can't stop it. You can't stop an avalanche with a snowball. But if you understand the science, then you can. And that's why it's the only hope. Now, I don't talk in apocalyptic terms these days. I mostly talk in terms of mental illness and medical treatments because people can accept that kind of stuff. But that's how it's going to come in. If we can develop an effective C promoter, by the way, C is not the whole, there's another thing called V, which is to do with energy, confidence, vigour, which also should be a very good treatment for things like anxiety disorders and giving people confidence and so forth. So there's these two basic structures. But if we can actually work out a way of creating a treatment, you won't need to do anything else, it'll happen. And we're talking about a rounding error. You could spend $1 billion on propaganda and achieve nothing. You can spend $1 million developing a treatment. It'll be more powerful than anything you could possibly imagine. That's the weird thing about it. I mean, I know it sounds megalomaniac in a way, doesn't it? But the point of it, this stuff does work. I mean, we've seen this effect. Why is the birth rate dropping? They're spending trillions of dollars trying to prop up the birth rate. What effect does it have? Nothing. It has nothing to do with it. People have children because they like children. And basically, I see people like children, which is part of the biology that says that, you've got to spend a lot of attention on children. That's your nature if you're very high C. You want children, you want to control them. Like, I've got 10 kids. Why? Because I love kids.
10 kids.
I've got 10 kids. I love kids. I'd have more if I could.
Are you okay?
I've never in my life ever wanted anything but more children, all right? The point of it is that's why the birth rate dropped. People don't like children as much. You see all these studies that say, why do people, when are people happiest? They usually show people are less happy when they have children.
Right.
But I'm not the case with me. I'm happiest when I have children. You'll have kids, and if you go back to the Victorian age, for example, the home is a hearth. It's a refuge from the world. Victorian people like Charles Darwin, those kind of people, they loved their families.
Right.
They loved having children. They enjoyed that sort of life to an extraordinary extent. Right. In a way that people didn't see it as a burden. It's just something they wanted. A woman just wants to spend her life looking after children because that gives her the most fulfillment in that if you've got that kind of temperament.
Jim, the way you're talking about family and the love of children reminds me of the way you talk about your franchisees and your staff. How much of this, what we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, has influenced the way you've built gyms? Are you in a roundabout way increasing the level of C by empowering all these people to have their own franchises?
Oh, I wouldn't put it that way. It has trivial effects. Sorry, it's the snowball against the avalanche.
Right.
I obviously my own temperament is very extreme. I'm very passionate about service. I'm very idealistic about things. I always take long-term viewpoints. Most of the best decisions I made in my whole business career are ones that I made against my own financial self-interest. And at the time they looked like they were a bad financial decision. Like when I started off the franchise, one of the things I was absolutely determined to do was I wasn't going to put franchisees on who would fail because I would feel responsible for their failure. Now, I thought this would slow the growth of my business because I'd be knocking back people who might succeed. But I wasn't prepared to do it. Now, I've since recognised that actually was a fantastic business decision for all kinds of reasons. It is because you have, people are more positive inside. You don't have the failures who are dragging everybody down. You don't have the ex-people saying Jim's is hopeless. We do have them, but not as many. But the point of it is that's a very idealistic. It was done for different reasons, often largely Christian reasons too. So
faith informs a lot of your business decisions.
Yes, that's right. So it certainly helped me to be successful. But as to my business increasing C, no, I don't think so. It's a snowball against an avalanche.
Do you think, Jim, that other faiths could similarly have that kind of an effect?
Oh yes.
So if you're a devout Muslim, or even a devout atheist like Sam Harris.
Well, it's not a religion, is it?
Well, I don't know, is it? I feel like atheism in the new green religion is very much a thing. They have original sin, they have no saviour, they have a lot of
the only thing is that what humanism does, which is what you're basically talking about, is takes Christian values and leave God out. Now, one of the problems with that is you get the loose leaf Bible effect. Christianity is a very powerful cultural technology. So is Islam, so is Judaism, so is traditional Confucianism or Hinduism. They're all cultural technologies. The trouble with humanism is that what you're going to do is to pick and choose. You'll take the aspect of Christianity that's got to do with love of the fellow man and so forth, but you'll leave out the one about chastity. Okay. The trouble is, chastity, fasting, those kinds of principles, Sabbath keeping, are actually crucial. It's part of the technology that makes it powerful. And if you take those out, you get rid of them. In the end, what you have is a wishy-washy, vague nothingness that doesn't have any effect on anybody.
Why can't there be a new system, a new religion created? I mean, these are all created, right? Islam and...
Well, I'd like to say they came from God, of course. But... well, you could, but you've got to have these features, and people, if they're going to rationalise it and say, well, just take what suits us, they don't have the power.
Well, see, this is the problem. A lot of people like what you're talking about. There's aspects of Christianity that they like, but they just can't stomach their perceived loss of freedom or the Puritanism.
Yes.
And they're looking for a way to have their cake and eat it too.
Well, it won't work. It won't work. That's the whole thing. And you can see it very clearly in different churches. I mean, there's a big division in Christian churches. You've got the at one extreme, you've got the mainstream churches, which are basically just embrace the modern world. I said, let's have
gay priests and whatever.
Gay priests and sex before marriage is fine and stuff like that. And we don't worry about fasting. We don't worry about Sabbath keeping. All that stuff. We just love each other and so forth. And then you have the hardline extremes of the charismatics and the fundamentalists who basically say that the Bible is there, the world was created 6,000 years ago, which is rubbish, of course. It's impossible from so many points of view. But every word of the Bible we will keep to, so we cannot have gay marriage. We cannot have sex before marriage. These are right out. Now, what's actually happening to those two groups, if you look at it, the liberal, modern churches which are doing these things become popular, they're dropping like a stone. They're dropping like about 30% per decade.
And the fundamentalists are rising, aren't they?
The fundamentalists are strong, or they're rising. Mormons is another example. Mormons are very, very strict fundamentalists, and they're doing extremely well. So the point of it is, people want to take out the love and the humanity and the nice stuff out, but leave the other stuff out. But you've tossed out the baby with the bathwater because it doesn't work. So that's why I go to a church that's basically a fundamentalist, and they all believe that the world was created 6,500 years ago.
And you don't.
And I don't. But I like the church because they follow strictly, fundamentally. We do things like fasting. We have very strict ideas about what sex and so forth before marriage and these kind of things. It's very, very strong in that area.
So some of these things you're talking about, you're actually taking beyond your own experience and thoughts. You've created the Institute for, what's it called, ISM.
Yeah, that's I'm not part of that anymore. It was an attempt to actually give a basis for the research. But what I've done is I've actually passed that business on to my partner, who's running quite successfully, I might say. What I've now done is set up a dedicated research organisation with a full-time researcher.
What's that called?
Epigenes, we call it epigenes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in that because you actually started to get some real scientific evidence behind what you're saying, which is interesting because you've been saying this stuff for a long time, and I guess now you've done some experiments. I didn't get much information online about it, but you're starting to prove some of these theories with rats.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So these changes you're suggesting are going to take generations, though. So we're going to see.
No. Which changes?
Raising sea levels of people, unless we can get a biological intervention.
No, you can't do it. There's no other way. You cannot do it any other way but biologically. What will happen to our society in the normal course of events, leaving aside science, is that sea will collapse so thoroughly that the populations will basically become so weak and innervated and poor that more vigorous peoples from the Middle East in particular will come running in because they're the ones that can survive the collapse of the thing. Then until you move to a sort of mass peasant societies like traditional Ottoman Empire, this kind of thing. That's the normal future of the world. But if you could actually understand the science and change it, you'd see a resurgence. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is if only 10% of the population was to actually take advantage of these things, and the other 90% no, I don't want to do social engineering, that's fine, that's okay. Because there's 10% within a century, they'll be the only ones that matter.
So they'll
be the leaders, they'll be the leaders in politics, they'll be leaders in economics.
Yes.
They'll be the ones that have got the most children, they'll have kids,
yep.
and the rest will just become meaningless.
So if we're talking about this avalanche and fixing Victoria, if you will, we don't need to turn an entire population into productive high C people. We just need to turn enough to turn the tide.
It'll spread though. Once the technology becomes available, if we can develop this, then we could have something in the next couple of years. Wow. We could have something that would actually do this quite effectively. Like I said, look, I know it sounds really crazy, but it doesn't matter how many billions and billions and billions of dollars trying to change people's minds, you can't do it because the force of wealth and urbanization is so powerful. It's all a snowball against an avalanche. If you understand the biology, it'll be so powerful and so cheap. You can go to a country like Japan, which is in serious decline, and they're worried about it. Their birth rate is dropping, their population is dropping. Now, if you go to them and say, here's a technology where you can actually start to, restore yourself, you get your businesses, your industries back on order, you can have your birth rate starting to rise again. I mean, they'll take it up. And the countries that take this up will become so powerful that they're going to be overwhelmingly more successful than those that don't. So I do think individuals will the ones where it'll mostly work.
Okay, and this, of course, is going to be rolled out to the expensive side of the market first, I assume. This is how all innovations seem to diffuse over time. Except
that it's going to be cheap. It's going to be cheap. We're talking about something, the actual to apply this stuff will be like an immunisation program. Basically virtually every kid on earth, about 90% of kids on earth are now vaccinated against something. We're talking about something of that nature. This is not expensive technology. I know it sounds bizarre. You think anything that transformative should cost billions and trillions of dollars, but no, it won't. We're talking about a few millions of dollars. Like I said, the Gates Foundation could do it worldwide. It's a tiny, tiny thing once you understand the science. People just won't accept it, but look, when I wrote my books on biohistory, that was the idea that I was trying to get some interest. And it did get some interest. It is actually being taught at some university campuses in some courses.
Well, that was recent. That was only 2016 you started to publish those, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So how's that going? It's being taught now, biohistory?
Yeah, in some areas, in some universities.
Okay.
I know there's some people, academics, who actually have been, they're in touch with me and so forth, that are doing it. But it hasn't got widespread adoption. Once again, it's because our way of thinking is governed so much by our temperament. And if you haven't got a temperament that thinks in these terms or can grasp these terms, you're not going to like it. The people that like this kind of thinking are those who actually, strangely enough, it's people like racists who actually come at it fairly fast, even though to my mind they're totally wrong because it's epigenetics, not genetics. I got a withering review from the Occidental Quarterly on that subject. They said, I'm ignoring genes. I'm not. I'm just telling you you're wrong, guys. But people with that kind of mental attitude of being of fear of what's going on are the ones that are most likely to accept these kinds of things. But that's only a very small minority today. The great majority are basically, like the Andrew's supporters, very, very complacent, very weak, follow one, you ruler blindly, don't use your minds. I mean, just that kind of stuff.
Okay. There's a lot of suspicion of the Gates Foundation and vaccinations and so on at the moment. And I don't know if it's so much about the vaccinations. I think people are resisting this kind of mandated government overreach. I assume you're not a fan of that mandated approach to life.
Oh, I think what the Gates Foundation does is fantastic. If you ask me, the person I admire most in the world is Bill Gates. I think what he's done is incredible. Things like, safe water supplies and toilets that work with minimum cost and so forth. Cost-effective ways. I mean, the Gates Foundation has saved millions of lives. Nobody knows quite how many.
So you don't buy the conspiracy around his nefarious motives?
No way. I think it's shocking. I think an incredibly decent and good man has been... I really don't have words to say what I think of that kind of stuff.
You told me that you felt misrepresented by Channel 7. Was it Channel 7?
Yeah, it wasn't so much that misrepresented. What happened was that I made the point that the original guidelines from the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the law of the land, said that, and this is a very careful document, like 6 pages long, detailed breakdown. This has been worked out obviously over weeks or months. Very careful, the best health advice. Right at the top it said, sole operators working alone are allowed to continue. Because obviously any health service will tell you, if you don't have any contact with anybody, you're not going to infect anybody. So that was there. Week later at a press conference, the Premier gets up and says, no mowing, no cleaning. Now, why did he say that? Well, because he didn't know the regulations, because they're very long and lengthy. He just didn't know. And of course, once he's said that, if he backs down, he's seen as weak, so he says, I'll just bear down at it. There's expert advice. I won't tell you what advice. I won't tell you who told me, but nobody, no lawn mowing, no cleaning. Now, when that press conference came out, I got legal advice, and I said, what's the law? And they said, the law is that you can work alone. The Premier's words at a press conference don't overcome the law. So what I actually did is I went on TV and I did a long interview, and I said, okay, first of all, the law clearly states that you can work alone. I've told my franchisees to continue working. I said, don't worry about it, because if you're prosecuted, it's not possible because you're obeying the law. So you won't get into trouble because you're obeying the law by working, because the law is that you can work. And just to give you some confidence in this, if you do get sued, which you won't, I will pay the fine. So I'm telling people to obey the law, but I'm telling people the law is that you can work. Now what they did is they cut out everything in between and got me saying, I will pay your fine.
I remember. They made it look like you were saying to disobey the law.
But in fact, if you took the whole interview, I was saying, this is the law. Obey the law. And I've always advised people to obey the law. So that's what happened.
So what do you think about just laws and unjust laws? Should we obey them if they're unjust?
No, we should not.
So, okay, that's what most people will say. How do you determine what's just and unjust?
Well, you have to look at your own judgment, don't you?
Okay, but now it's moral relativism, right? Or in your case, Christianity. You know, if Daniel is making such strange laws at the moment, I'm starting to, well, I'm already doing civil disobedience. You know, I went out for more than an hour when we were allowed to go for an hour and so on. How do you know what's right and what's wrong? Because everyone just seems to appeal to follow the rules, follow the rules.
Look, the law itself actually says, the Attorney General did a very interesting interview. And in his interview, she actually said that restraints on, by the law, by the basic law of this country, restraints on activity should be proportional to the benefits in terms of health.
That's in the Act as well, by the way.
Yes, okay. Yeah. So now, to me, if you've got a situation where it says, if you're a council worker in groups, you can do a job, an individual working alone cannot do the same job. That's pretty clear that we're not talking about health here, we're talking about politics. So it's a disproportionate. You've got an activity which is clearly no danger to health, you're shutting it down, okay? Yet you clearly showed that groups can work together, so therefore, you know, it's inconsistent. Now that to me is an obvious case for an unjust law. Now, when it comes to other things like the curfew, for example, I think that's pretty, you could argue either way.
Right, and so I sense we're getting a lot of people coming around to this idea, hey, that's not logical, that's crazy, and they're starting to bend the rules. I mean, you can see the traffic outside, it's getting busier and busier and busier. Are you feeling this turn from all the people?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's an increasing, people are just increasingly fed up. I don't know how people can be saying to support the Premier overall. I think it comes down to loyalty, but I know citizens in general are just getting so fed up with the irrationality of it. Look, the point of it is too, I think the Premier's viewpoint is that I'll just say the more harsh things I say, the more people will obey me. Well, in actual fact, if you make laws that people think are stupid and unfair and biased and unjust and all based on unions, they don't respect them. And that unravels the whole project. A more moderate system that people could believe in and have the consensus of the community behind it will be far more likely to control infection than an extreme one that people say, this is ridiculous. I mean, why should there be a curfew? That wasn't even done on public health advice. It was just something that somebody said, oh, it's easy to control people. I mean, so much of this doesn't make sense. There's this thing with the dog wash. You know, you can have salons open with 5 or 6 people working in it, but a sole operator can't do the same job. I mean, that's insane. You're saying that 6 people together, a less chance of infection than one person by themselves? Obviously not. But Andy Medic controls the upper house. He gives his vote to the Premier, gives him dictatorial powers. Here's for you. It's politics. It's it's so obviously unjust and unfair. How can you respect that sort of guideline?
Well, the human cost is extreme.
Yes.
This is a humanitarian crisis.
Look, I know 2 families, just amongst my immediate franchisees, where they've had a child commit suicide. Attempt suicide.
Because of the lockdown.
Yeah, because of the lockdown. Absolutely.
Why? I've heard this, but what is it? Because they feel like they can't go out. Like, why does it?
It's just enormous amount of stress. I mean, caused their helplines, the suicide helplines have gone up 30%.
The leading indicators are huge. Yeah,
and I see it all the time. I talk to lots and lots of people. Unlike the Premier, I'm in touch with a lot of people all the time. My franchisees, others too. And I hear these stories of frustration and despair, and they write to me and say, it's so unfair, and they want me to do something about it. What can I do except speak out? They just get so upset and so angry. And it does cause... Being confined to your home is 23 hours a day. It's pretty hard for anybody. And you've got the teenagers in particular are really badly affected. I know, because I've got a teenage daughter, and she finds it really, really difficult. She's a social girl. She loves going. She's a beautiful Christian girl. She doesn't do anything wrong.
But the Zoom's not cutting it.
No,
it's not the same.
It doesn't. And you can chat around. She wants to see her friends.
Right.
And it's very, very hard on her.
Did you realise how much mental health was important before this? Because I didn't. I thought it was a bit of a hoo-ha. But now I'm realising my kids are suffering that. This is a very real need for humans.
Look, at Jim's, we're very aware of mental health. It's been I wouldn't say it's a hobby horse because it's so widely shared. We had a case a couple of years back where a franchisee in Western Australia killed his 3 little girls and his wife. And it's deeply shocking. I mean, I know you say we've got nearly 4,000 franchisees, but Jim's is in many ways like a family. We're very connected. We know each other. I know pretty well the franchisor of this guy. I don't remember him. I would have met him at training. But I went to a meeting over there in Perth, and most of the franchisees in the entire state were there, and they were really, really upset about the whole thing. They felt very injured by it. I have to say, it wasn't because of his job. He actually said his job was great. He loved his business. It was demons that did it. But at that meeting, actually, I asked him, what can we do to prevent this kind of thing happening? And one of the things they came up with, there was a whole stack of things actually. More training for franchisors, which we're doing now. Sending around fridge magnets with all the emergency numbers, we're doing that now. But one of the things they came up with is we want to actually be mentors, or have mentors who are not paid, franchisees to support other franchisees if they want someone to talk to. And I asked, well, look, who would do this? Because there's a lot of work and not going to get paid. Yes. Most of the people in the audience raised their hands, most of them, which is pretty incredible. Wow. And there was hundreds of people there, so it was... We're very concerned. I mean, because we see suicides happen. I've had franchisees who committed suicide, a franchisor committed suicide. We know these people. Yes. So we were already very, very well primed. And when the lockdown happened, we were really, really aware of what's going to happen. And one of the things we did, of course, as soon as the lockdown happened, we actually said to every franchisee, no fees. We completely cut down their fees. They don't pay us anything, which of course nobody would dream of doing anything else. But what's really interesting about this is the franchisors have a responsibility as part of their service in terms of fees of ringing franchisees regularly. And we find that ringing every month or ideally every week, it actually has a very, very positive effect. Yes. Well, guess what? Even though they're paying no fees, the franchisors are by and large still ringing their guys because they're saying they need us help more than ever. Wow. So even though they're not paid, and I'm really proud of that. I'm really, really proud of the fact that they're doing that. And they really care about their people, even though they've got no income themselves. Yeah. They can't work in the field themselves, they don't get anything from fees, but they're still bringing people to look after them because they know how dangerous this whole thing is.
How did you set up that culture? Was that deliberate?
Yes. It took us a while to figure out what mattered. One of the things we were discovering is that we've changed our views with time. In the beginning, a franchisor was simply someone who responded to franchisees. And we tried all kinds of things. We used to do things like get them to do business reviews, where they sit down for half a day with the franchisor and go through their business. And we thought that'd be a great way of improving them. But we did the statistics, and you can measure these things out. We found there was no impact. It was really weird. Half a day with the guy, no impact. Going out the road, helping with their jobs. They loved it, but did it affect their mood? Did it affect their survival, their attrition rate? No effect. Okay. But we're having a look at different franchisors who were really successful, and we sort of talked to them and said, what are you doing? Oh, I ring my franchisees. Oh, really? You ring them? I just make sure I ring them regularly. And what we found was that franchisors who were doing that were actually getting incredibly good results, which is bizarre if you think about it. You spend 10 minutes more a month ringing somebody, has more effect than half a day working with them in the field once a year. But that's what happened. And then we had some franchisors who were doing even better than that. And we said, what are you doing? We're bringing them weekly. And they were getting incredible results, and the franchisees were loving them. So we've gradually developed, we've learned that frequent, short communications are actually more helpful. We also look at meetings too. We figured out how often meetings should be held. We figured out that you run every 6 weeks.
6 weeks, okay.
Now, that's not rational. It's not like every quarter or every month. But we work it out. We say if you've got less than 6 weekly meetings, franchisees tend to be less happy more than every 6 weeks.
Right.
So what we've done is developed technology to work out what's the best form of support. And so much of it, and it's an interesting thing too, in the beginning was all about how you help a person run a business better. What we've come to realise is that the best conversations are those of a mate. You know, how you going? How's your wife? How'd your daughter's birthday go? How's business? I mean, or even, you don't even have to talk about the business, because if you've got the relationship there, people will come to you for help.
Jim, this is why I wanted to have you on, because you take a holistic approach to the human being. And I love the fact that you're so successful in business, and yet you see, you know, the humanity of it, and you've built this giant family. I'm wondering what is next for you. Do other franchise systems around the world look to you and how you've done it and take your approach? Are you going to do some training colleges or something? I don't know. You've got something very unique here.
Well, they should, but they don't want to. The absolute extreme opposite case is something like Retail Food Group. Where they basically just exploit the franchisees, rip everything off them they can, overcharge them, they charge them double. You've got to buy from us and pay double what you pay from Coles.
Right.
It's the opposite extreme, because it's all driven by short-term thinking. But of course it's been utterly disastrous, because they basically crushed and destroyed the businesses they took over.
Yes.
All of them are going down whereas we're obviously rising. People should listen. But you know, what we do at Jim's is incredibly radical. No franchise system in the world does this. I mean, just to give you an example, our franchisees can move to a different franchisor if they want to. No questions asked. It's up to the franchisor accepts them. Their own franchisor has no sense. So the franchisor has to look after them because they're clients.
Yes.
They can vote out their franchisor.
That's unheard of.
Unheard of. And they do. It does happen. It happened actually last week. We had one group of franchisees vote out their franchisor. And the franchisor's going to sell at a fair price.
Yeah.
They're not confiscation.
Yeah.
But who else can do that? Our franchisees and our franchisors can veto changes to their own manual.
Wow.
So we can't impose things on them unless they agree to it. Now, if the majority agree, the minority is bound. But the automatic right of renewal after 10 years, unless they're non-compliant, we cannot fail to. I mean, all this stuff. Some of it was in the contract in the beginning. A lot of it's come in since then as we've given franchisees more power. We have a branding fund, for example, which is contributed by every franchisee. We don't control that. I've got no money at all as a national franchisor. That's actually voted on by the franchisors.
Right. So you've effectively turned the pyramid of authority on its head. You know, in MBAs now, they've moved from transactional leadership to transformational leadership. They're talking a lot now about servant leadership. And, you know, I've been saying this a lot, that the political office is really an office of servanthood, and the greatest political office should be the greatest servant of all. And what you're doing is effectively, I mean, your phone number's out there, your email address is out there.
Oh, only to my franchisees. I don't want anybody else ringing me.
No.
People like who are involved in the public media and so forth, like yourself, but I don't give it to anybody else.
No, but I mean, the fact that you're really following that principle of serving your staff, your franchise, and importantly, the customer is at the top of your hierarchy.
No, sorry.
No?
My franchisees are my top.
They're your top, okay.
Our first priority is the welfare of franchisees. We're also passionate about customer service. Now, I don't see any contradiction. In fact, franchisees get very upset at me because I'm so tough on customer service. But as I say to them, it's not because customers are more important to you than you. It's because my priority is you.
Right.
And if we give great service to customers, then you're going to get all the work you want at the best price you want. Right. So I'm doing it for your sake. Okay. Now, what we've done, for example, 3 years ago, we brought in a system of surveys where we actually survey customers, and about 30% of our customers are good enough to reply. And we use that to feedback. We feed into complaints. We feed back into awards and so forth. That's had a transformational effect. Our level of actual complaints has gone down dramatically since we've been doing that. But the interesting thing that's happened is that actual leads have gone through the roof. In fact, our leads now are running at about 30% of our leads are unserviced normally, which is extraordinary. And you might think that's because of extra advertising, but no, in fact, in a lot of situations, we have to give back chunks of advertising to the franchisees because we can't spend it. I've got a region, a fencing region. I'm going to give back about $60,000 to my franchisees for unspent advertising. I say, guys, I can't spend it. It's your money. Take it back.
Yeah. Okay.
We've given hundreds of thousands of dollars back because we can't spend the advertising because our guys are busy year round, and yet we're 30% unserviced. Now, what that means is that our franchisees can, because one thing I tell my franchisees too, if you're talking about customers versus franchisees, I tell my franchisees really strongly, because I'm always the first speaker in the franchisee training course. I said, you give great service, and I tell you why. To be more successful, you have to do it, you have to do this, ring them back promptly, send a text if you can't get through, all the stuff that you're supposed to do. Makes delight and amaze the customer, but then I say one thing is, don't be cheap. Look, whatever anybody's charging, and add at least 10%.
A lot of people say this. Why do you say that?
Because my franchisee is number one. Because my franchisee's welfare is what's going to determine everything, and that's morally speaking and financially speaking. Because our growth is not limited by clients; it's limited by franchisees. We could have double as many fencing franchisees as we have, and we still wouldn't be able to cope with the demand for our services.
This is surprising because you're not taking a strong capitalist bent on the customer as king. You're actually taking more of a, I don't know if you can say socialist approach, but you've got this big family thing going on. How would you advise other businesses to take some of that into their, what can they do to copy that?
Look, there's this whole thing, the Friedman idea that is it Friedman? Who's the one that says it's only the stakeholders that count? The only stakeholders that count are the people, the shareholders. Yeah. I just fundamentally disagree with that. I think it's not only immoral not to look at your other stakeholders like your employees or your clients, or in our case franchisees. It's also stupid that the best companies are actually those that look after their stakeholders too. And having the frame of mind that says only the owners matter is immoral, but it's dumb.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons we do reasonably well is that we've always, from an emotional point of view, the thing that upsets me the most, I don't like upset customers, but getting a franchisee who's been badly treated is the thing that gets me really, really upset. And you know, I'm not a nice person always. Franchisors can sometimes get very irate at me because I really will take the franchisee's part if I see them as being badly treated. Right. But it benefits in so many ways too. I mean, one of the things I'm very proud of, we've got nearly 4,000 franchisees over 30 years. Do you know how many times I've actually been to court with any of my franchisees?
It's like 3 or 4 times, isn't it?
3 times.
That's ridiculously low.
Once with the franchisee in the early stages, and we wanted a total refund for some insane reason. Another 2 times with franchisors, both of whom I actually settled by giving them exactly what I'd offered them in the first place.
It's unheard of.
We virtually never go to court. Well, you see, you treat people decently, and you treat them fairly, and you don't tend to get legal problems, in my view. I mean, we have an in-house lawyer who's 3 days a week and stuff, but she mostly concerns with documents and things. We have so few disputes. It really pays to do it that way. There are franchise systems out there which 10% of the franchisees are in some form of litigation with their franchisor. I know in the early days of Jim's, there was a rival of ours, VIP, who was bigger in those days.
They're still around, aren't they?
They're still around, yeah. They're a lot smaller than us now, of course. But one of the things that happened is they had a half dozen franchisees who wanted to go independent.
Yes.
Took the case to the, went to court, lost the case, and then went on the investigators. And these people who actually went to court and said, I don't want to be part of VIP anymore, lost the case, but they never recovered from that. Now, it was a stupid decision. We actually have the thing in our contract that says you pay $4,000, you can operate independently. And the reason it's set that way because nobody's going to fight a court case for $4,000, so they just pay.
That's a crazy thing to have in your... I imagine lawyers would have told you don't put that in the contract. That's what I would say to you. Yeah, well, what they try and do is they try and change the wording to make it so it's really difficult, and they have all kinds of things about breach of trade. But the fact of the matter, if you went to court with a breach of trade, it's pretty iffy. You might succeed, you might not. But why would you want to have a court case with somebody who doesn't want to be part of you? So we just it's a little bit of roadmap. You know, $4,000. It's maybe 6 months worth of fees. It's nothing big. So, are you going to do this until the day you die, Jim?
Yeah.
Jim's group is.
I imagine so. Yeah. I mean, if somebody came and offered me obscene amount of money for my business, I'd probably accept it.
Why? What are you going to do with that money?
Research.
Oh, that's your real passion.
In the end, Jim's is my passion, but God's given me a job to do. That's the way I see it. It's the parable of the talents. God's given me a job to do, and that is to do with my research. And that is where ultimately, that's the purpose of what I'm doing. Now, in the process of doing that, obviously I want to run a business, and I take a lot of concern for my franchisees, and I really care that they're successful, and my staff too. So that's why I'll almost certainly never sell, because nobody's going to offer me the kind of money that would make me want to sell.
And what about your children? I guess succession to your children, is that where it's going to go?
I've got a couple of kids who I think could make very good heirs. I've got some brilliant kids.
Yeah.
One good thing about having 10 children is that you've got more than one to choose.
Yeah.
I've also got one of my sons who's my heir in biohistory, Andrew.
What do you mean by history?
Well, he believes in the research project. He actually helped to write those books.
Right.
But he's a neuroscientist now. He's doing his PhD, so he has the knowledge, the scientific knowledge that I don't have. So that's been an incredible blessing. That's actually more important to me than the business itself, because I know that if I walked under a bus tomorrow, Andrew would continue it. Andrew's in charge. In fact, the fact that the family trust actually puts the biohistory as the heir to the fortune in a sense.
Well, let me end this way. You mentioned the parable of the talents. Were you given a lot of talents, Jim? I mean, the biblical sense of talents.
I'm good at some things. I'm terrible at most. I think that's what you'd say. I mean, I'm so bad at a lot of things. I have very poor people skills. I offend people all the time without meaning to. I mean, I've been divorced 3 times, for heaven's sake, and that's because 3 women couldn't stand to live with me. Let's face it, it doesn't say a lot about somebody. But I'm incredibly happy married for 19 and a half years, so it's wonderful. So I've won the lottery. But Lee is an incredible human being. You don't meet too many of those. So I'm not very good at detail. I tend to make rash decisions. I don't look before I leap. I don't learn what I'm going into. I just do so many stupid things. But I do have certain kinds of abilities. I'm intensely creative. My mind is flexible in a way that almost nobody's is. It's just on the absolute extreme. I just think differently to everybody else. And I just look at something and I come up with it. And I do that all the time, even still. I come up with ideas and think, people, what's that? Yeah, that'll work. Try it. And I'm also very passionate, very idealistic. And a lot of what we do in gyms is actually, it's not just a matter of systems, it's also a matter of what you say. That like the fact that my franchisors ring my franchisees, even though they're not getting paid for it. Why do they do that? Because in a sense they become part of a culture which lives and breathes service to franchisees. We had a guy called Brian Ducker came out to one of our national conferences many years ago, and he'd been involved with franchising for decades, and he'd seen everything that was to be seen, and he actually talked to my people, and he said, I've never seen anything like this. The genuine concern for franchisees. I've never seen any franchise organisation that thinks the way that you do. Well, where does that come from?
Well, is it self-made? Have you created this, or are you born this way? When I say,
well, what makes me what I am is a whole lot of things. But the fact is, that's my own personal belief. See, people ask, "Aren't you proud of what you've created?" And I never think in terms of numbers, because it really doesn't mean much to me. What I'm proud of is the fact that the values that I hold, the service values, are so widely shared in Jim's group. And it's not just the franchisors care about the franchisees. Franchisees tend to care about each other. They look after each other. If somebody's got a bit of a problem, other people will rally around and help them. We had a terrible situation with one of our dog wash franchisees who was forbidden to work, and she's on a bridging visa, and she's in a terrible situation.
No support.
Well, no government
bridging visa. Yeah, no government support.
No government support. She can't even apply for anything. She's afraid of being deported. She's forbidden by law to work. She's got to go into her neighbours, trying to ask them for any leftovers from food. She's about to be evicted from her house. So, people just gather around. I lent her some money. I said, if you do get evicted, come and stay at Foothills for no charge. Obviously, because it's empty anyway. But more than that, people got a GoFundMe thing, and a lot of franchisees just tipped in money and just helped her out, and she's surviving and she'll get through. That kind of attitude is that's part of the culture, and I'm proud of that. I really am. I had one franchisee ring me up who said, "Look, what can I do to help? Who can I help?" And I said, "Listen, you've been shut down. Your home business has been destroyed." It's a test and tag guy from Melbourne, and I said, "Look, I'm sure we can find money otherwise, but I really thank you for that." Even though he'd been really badly affected, he wanted to help others, and I just felt that was like a high point of my week. That call. I just love that guy.
Jim, this is why I wanted you on. This is amazing. Thank you so much for coming in, because you're building something so much bigger than Jim's, even your research. I think you're building an amazing cultural change in our world, and I'm thankful to have people like you in it. So listen, is there anything you want to say that we haven't covered? Something you want to say to the Premier? He's not going to watch this probably, but well, yeah. Is there anything you want? Is this advice you'd give to the people out there watching through this hard time, because they're looking to people like you who are standing up?
I don't know, really. I mean, as a nation, we need to turn back to God. That's the way I see it. I think God made us. I mean, God's the creator, and the way I look at this is that if you had a problem with a washing machine, you wouldn't go out to your car and get the Toyota manual and then bring it up and say, how do I fix my washing machine, would you? Because it wouldn't work, because it's not the maker's manual. You'd actually try and get the washing machine manufacturer and you'd have a look at that. Now, if you were handy, which I'm not, of course, I wouldn't be able to, I'd get the repair guy in. But if you wanted to fix it, you get the maker's manual. To me, the Bible is the maker's manual. It's God's blueprint of how he created this. Now, I don't think he created it 6,500 years ago. I think it was rather further back than that. But if we follow the maker's manual, our lives, our societies, our businesses turn out a lot better than if we don't.
There you go. There you have it. That was Jim Penman. What an amazing guy. So much more than mowing lawns, people. And I hope you've enjoyed this interview. And Jim, thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome.